John Woo returns to the U.S. theater with his latest release, Silent Night, starring Joel Kinneman as a grieving father of a boy who is killed in the crossfire of a gang shooting and decides to turn himself into an instrument of retribution. One of the most acclaimed action directors of all time is back in the U.S. with his latest release, Silent Night, written by Robert Archer Lynn. Weirdly in the tradition of Die Hard, it's a Christmas movie. Unlike Die Hard, it was actually released at Christmas time. Silent Night stars Joel Kinneman as Brian Godlock, a grieving father of a young boy who was inadvertently struck and killed by a stray bullet from gang war crossfire while the family is celebrating the holidays. Brian himself is wounded by gunfire when he recklessly pursues the shooters at the beginning of the story and is shot in the throat, rendering him speechless, thus establishing the theme for the film: no dialogue. Inconsolable after his recovery, Brian sets to turning himself into an instrument of retribution to kill everyone whom he sees as responsible. Needless to say, his obsession cost him his marriage, as his wife, played by Catalina Moreno, can no longer remain with him in his current state. Brian refines his shooting skills, driving skills, and fighting skills while strengthening and conditioning his body for the task over the next year. The day of reckoning is Christmas Eve, the same day his son died. Silent Night is the latest of a long line of revenge tales about often ordinary people transformed by grief into revenge killers. It seems Woo wanted to set this film apart by making sure he has the audience's undivided attention on screen as he decides that no principal performer speaks a single word of dialogue. With the exception of superfluous exposition from ADR voices, there is no spoken information. This means that all the actors must perform with just their faces and bodies. To be fair, there is nothing complicated about this story that requires a lot of dialogue to explain it anyway. It is pretty easy to follow. But there were more than a few moments that were kind of awkward to not hear any dialogue. In terms of keeping the tension taut, the story smartly establishes that while clearly driven by grief and revenge, Brian is still an amateur. We spend a year watching him learn his deadly skill set, but he is not a practiced assassin. His initial confrontations with his adversaries don't go smoothly, and you are always reminded that he is new at this until he finally falls into that rhythm. Even in the road combat scenes where he is clearly at his best, we can detect varying degrees of fear in Brian's eyes, which keeps the anxiety dialed up for the audience. Or it could just be that he's chosen to do this in a Mustang. The other notable appearance in the film is Scott Mescudi, or Kid Cudi as he is better known. I'm not sure what the decision was in casting him to play the police detective, but I suppose he does a fine job reacting to pictures, shooting guns, and having no dialogue. Final thoughts on Silent Night? It feels like John Woo is saying far more about the toll of grief than revenge in this story. In looking at the story through that lens, the film plays better as a tragedy than the latest in yet another person who got a John Wick starter set for Christmas. John Woo deserves credit for setting the bar for the modern action flick at the end of the 20th century. And many titans who followed in his footsteps owe their success to him laying that foundation. That said, John Woo doesn't raise the bar here. He tells a strangely compelling but simple story of a grieving father. The action is solid, the story is simple, straightforward, and the silence is maybe just a little awkward. Go in with that in mind, and I think you might just add Silent Night to your Christmas viewing list.